Hello and good morning. You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Now, Russian state television is reporting that President Putin has visited the Ukrainian city of Mariupol. It's believed to be his first visit to Russian-occupied territories of Ukraine's Donbas region since the war broke out. Well, this footage is said to be President Putin driving around the streets of Mariupol. The port city was captured by Russia in the early months of the war after fierce fighting, specifically around the Azovstal steel plant in the city there. It's now been largely destroyed, though Russia has been rebuilding parts of it to try and erase its Ukrainian identity. And according to the state's television, you can see Putin here has visited the city's Philharmonic Theatre, the same hall allegedly being used by Russia to hold prisoners of war during sham trials that were held in Mariupol. Well, earlier, he's visited Crimea, a peninsula Russia claimed as its own from Ukraine 9 years ago. That trip came just hours after he was made the subject of an arrest warrant over the abduction of children from Ukraine. Our international correspondent, John Sparks, has this.
The Russian President, Vladimir Putin, is liable to arrest in 123 countries. But no one will detain him in Crimea, the territory seized from Ukraine in 2014. And he marked the anniversary of its annexation with a tour of this art center. This is good, he says. He looked unruffled and unapologetic, and that was almost certainly the point. What is it in total? An art school? Asks Putin. Yes, an art school and a children's camp, replies the priest. We've agreed that we'll select children that are very talented. His visit came one day after the International Criminal Court accused him of abducting children from Ukraine to Russia. But these allegations are dismissed by his supporters in Crimea, who were out rallying and riding motorcycles in the city of Simferopol. Here, the president enjoys the people's blessing. Crimean Spring. For 9 years, we are together, states this flag. The court has accused Putin and the country's children's commissioner of the forced deportation of children, and it's easily provable. Both have appeared on television discussing it.
I think for many international criminal lawyers, a refreshing and encouraging sign that Prosecutor Khan is making a decision here to prosecute first a case that he knows he can prove with very little difficulty. But as I say, more charges are bound to follow.
Russia has been accused of committing multiple human rights violations in Ukraine, including attacks on civilians. These missiles hit a place called Avdiivka just after the court announced its indictment. But the court has put everyone on notice. War crimes, past and future, will be prosecuted. President Putin will not accept responsibility, and he won't present himself for trial. But he now celebrates the annexation of Crimea as an international fugitive from justice. John Sparks, Sky News.
Let's get a little reaction to the news that President Putin has visited Mariupol by speaking to the former Special Advisor on Russian and Eurasian Affairs, Mark Voyger, who's joining us now from Sofia in Bulgaria. Mark Voyger, good to have you with us. It's always a pleasure to have your analysis. I mean, what do you make of the fact that we've seen Putin turn up in Crimea and now in Mariupol in the days after the ICC have issued that arrest warrant?
Good morning, Kamali. Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure. Well, we got to admit that Putin is really the master of strategic surprises, especially when it comes to the information space. By his appearance first in Crimea and now in Mariupol, he is trying to send two important messages, both to the West as well as to his domestic audiences. To the West, the message is one of defiance, especially with this visit coming on the wings of the ICC decision ruling in The Hague. Pretty much he's showing that he's unapologetic and he, effectively he wants to show that he's above those those legal developments, and also to his people, he's showing that he's in control. Ultimately, as you saw, he's visiting different locations there. He wants to show the Russian people that he's taking care of things, that he's personally involved. This is part of this information warfare, which is really the centerpiece of Russian hybrid warfare, but also of Putin's personalistic grip on power. I mean, the stability of his regime is the center of gravity for Putin, and therefore he knows how to play this information game quite well. And information warfare requires also escalation dominance. So if the West does something to try to put pressure on him, he lashes out, he pushes against that with such messages, such visits. And also, of course, he's saying, he's telling the world and Ukraine, Crimea is ours. Obviously, the 18th of March was the anniversary of the illegal annexation of Crimea by Russia. So many messages. Putin is unapologetic. He's not yielding, obviously, and he's still, capable of surprising both the domestic and international audiences with such visits.
Amar, that effort to control the information space, as you say, is one that President Putin is a master in. But I do wonder about the decision as well to visit the particular areas that he has, including sort of the children's centre in Crimea and then a theatre in Mariupol, with the sort of symbolism that will have. Will the idea that he's gone to a children's centre in Crimea the day after he's accused of illegally deporting children from Ukraine to Russia, that message won't be lost on the Russian people, will it?
No, of course, yeah, absolutely. They will spin the story as, they always do, that Putin actually loves children, that he takes care of children, that what he and his commissioner for children's affairs did was actually, benevolent, beneficial for those children, etc. I mean, the Russian propaganda knows how to spin those stories. You're right. These are well-selected sites for the purposes of Russia's disinformation campaign, and it's definitely tied to this ICC ruling. This is part of the Kremlin's narrative, and it's so we can say that the information warfare has begun, the information campaign to actually try to exonerate Putin, at least in the eyes of the Russian population and of those nations and audiences that support Russia.
Yeah, and let's just look ahead at a couple of hours, 24 hours or so, Mark, because there is still a plan in place for President Xi Jinping to travel to meet Putin. I guess Putin will have to travel back from Mariupol for the meeting in Moscow. What difficulties is that going to place on President Xi and the Chinese state, who, before the war began, said they were standing back to back with Russia, but now President Putin is an indicted war criminal?
Well, it'll be, I would say, a serious reputational blow to President Xi, obviously meeting with someone who is now a pariah, effectively a criminal in the eyes of the civilized world. And of course, China still depends on its commercial relations with the West, especially Western Europe, where the court is located. But on the other hand, Xi is an ideological leader. And I suspect that in this case, ideological affiliations and the alignments of his interests with those of Putin, that is distracting the West and keeping the West involved in a theater that's away from Taiwan, away from East Asia, might actually play better for Xi. Therefore, I would be surprised if he cancels the visit. Obviously, there are many important things to decide there. The supply of Chinese ammunition, which has been reported already by the U.S. intelligence. Therefore, the propaganda will find a way to spin it, both on the Chinese and the Russian side, and explain it away.
Yeah. Okay, Mark, I do appreciate your analysis this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mark Voyager there. Now to some other news this morning, and back here, illegal migrants who arrive in the UK could be flown to Rwanda before the summer. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is in the African nation and suggested the first flights could leave for there in a matter of weeks. She acknowledged, however, that the timetable is dependent on legal challenges to the policy. The controversial plan is a key part of Rishi Sunak's pledge to stop small boats carrying migrants crossing the Channel. Our political correspondent, Mari Aurora, reports.
A controversial partnership undeterred by legal challenges. Home Secretary Suella Braverman this weekend met with the Rwandan Foreign Affairs Minister to agree an expansion of the deportation policy whereby not only asylum seekers but also those claiming to be victims of modern slavery could be removed from the UK. But with the scheme having deported a total of 0 migrants to the African nations so far, the clock is ticking to get migrants on planes and into accommodation ahead of the next general election.
Progress is being made rapidly, and I'm really confident on the back of the progress that I've seen here in Kigali that we will be able to operationalise this world-leading agreement very, very soon. Our laws will dramatically reduce the avenues for exploitation so that you won't be able to thwart our power to remove.
And not everyone in Rwanda agrees with the UK government on the policy.
I want to make this clear that we are not against refugees as a party. We are not. Because we support welcoming all refugees, either from Congo, from Burundi, from wherever, because they choose to come to Rwanda. But these ones, they never chose to come to Rwanda. They chose to go to the UK, so they are not our responsibility.
But with pressure from Conservative backbench MPs to reduce net migration and the government's immigration bill making its way through stages of parliamentary scrutiny as we speak, the Home Secretary is desperate to be seen to be on top of her brief.
Refugees are welcome here.
Although challenges may be minimal in Rwanda, back on home soil there still remains fierce opposition to the concept of outsourcing the UK's migration problems to other nations.
The idea that refugees should not be treated inhumanely and cruelly when they come to the UK is not even a political view, it's basic morality.
If people come on a boat, how extreme must your situation be?
The Home Secretary has said it would be her dream come true to see migrants flown to Rwanda.
Thanks so much for coming.
But she may not be smiling for long if her flagship policy fails to see the light of day. Mari Aurora, Sky News.
And that flagship policy will no doubt be a main talking point when Sophie Ridge on Sunday begins at 8:30. You'll be speaking to Oliver Dowden, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, and getting the view from the Labour Party when Lisa Nandy, the Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, is on the programme. There's a big political week ahead as Boris Johnson will be giving evidence to the Privileges Committee on Wednesday about Partygate, and Sophie and the team will tell you everything you need to know. That all begins at 8:30. Now, Donald Trump has used his social media site, Truth Social, to claim he's going to be arrested on Tuesday. The former president is being investigated over a payment made to the adult film actor Stormy Daniels to cover up an alleged affair. Our US correspondent James Matthews has the latest.
It would be the first time that a former US president has been indicted. It relates to an affair that Donald Trump allegedly had with an adult film actress, Stormy Daniels, 10 years ago. Just before the 2016 election, there were concerns in the Trump camp that she would go public with that story. And to that end, she was paid $130,000 by Donald Trump's lawyer. Now, that's not a crime. The hush money isn't a crime. But what prosecutors are looking at is how that was put through the books of the Trump organization. They believe there may have been a crime, a falsification in that, and possibly a breach of campaign finance laws. We have been expecting an announcement of an indictment from the prosecutors in Manhattan, but Donald Trump appears to have beaten them to it on his social media site. And in doing so, he has stated, protest, take our nation back. And these are menacing words that do evoke memories of the January the 6th insurrection. And his opponents have criticized him for fomenting potential trouble around this legal process. There are big questions around next week, not just on the logistics. New York authorities preparing for crowds, for potential protests, but also there is the potential spectacle of Donald Trump being fingerprinted, having his mugshot taken, potentially being taken on a so-called perp walk, where he is in handcuffs, escorted by the police in public, although that will depend on the extent to which he cooperates with authorities. But all sorts of questions that extend beyond the courtroom, of course, to do with the political impact of all of this. Remember that Donald Trump faces legal jeopardy on a number of fronts, to do with January the 6th, to do with classified documents found in his home in Mar-a-Lago in Florida, and also to do with alleged attempts to overturn the election in Georgia in 2020.
James Matthews there reporting from Washington. Now, back here, an emergency alert service is to be launched to warn people about potentially life-threatening events like wildfires and severe flooding. The government's planning to test the system next month, meaning people across the UK can expect to receive a siren-like message on their mobile phone. Our correspondent Alice Porter is here with more details about it. Alice, good to have you with us. Good morning to you. So just tell us, what are the details of this scheme?
Well, your phone or tablet, if there was going to be one of these emergency alerts, it would have a siren that would go on for about 10 seconds. It could vibrate and it would sort of read out a message. And these would be messages from government bodies or bodies which are dealing with an emergency situation in the vicinity of where you are. Now, these emergency alerts will only be sent when there's an immediate risk to people's lives. They include things like severe flooding, fires, extreme weather and public health emergencies. And it's hoped that almost 90% of mobile phones in a defined area could be reached under the new plans. Now, this system has been tested in sort of local parts of the country, but on the 23rd of April, it's going to be tested across the country, so that, in theory, every person on their mobile phone will receive one of these messages, and you're going to have to acknowledge that you've received them in order for the message to stop. Right, so you've got to make sure you've acknowledged the notification. And just how wide-ranging do you think this sort of thing could become? Well, look, it will be quite rare that you get one of these types of messages. You could go for months, if not years, and they're most likely to be for situations with extreme flooding or like the wildfires we saw in parts of East London and Essex last year. But there is the potential that it could be used if there was something like a terrorist attack. But officials acknowledge that they need more information about how this emergency signalling system could be used in order for it to be used in such a fast-moving situation. But this scheme has been used in multiple countries, in the US, in Canada, so they'll be hoping it could be used here as well. Yeah, and there must be some concerns, though, about a scheme that sort of sends messages to everyone's phone. Well, look, there's always a possibility for human error. I mean, if we look at 2018 in Hawaii, everyone got sent an alert to their phones that there was a potential of a missile attack. So there is always the potential, and there will always be concerns from people about privacy concerns as well. I mean, the Cabinet Office insists they won't be collecting data on any members of the public. And crucially, you can opt out. This won't be compulsory. Right, Alice, do appreciate that. And Oliver Dowden from the Cabinet Office is on later, so maybe Sophie will put a question or two to him about that. Thank you for now. All right, the Scottish National Party, which has enjoyed years of unbroken electoral success, is in a state of chaos this morning after a series of resignations and scandals. Just weeks after the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, announced that she was stepping down, and in the middle of a leadership election, her husband, the most powerful official in the SNP, has resigned. Peter Murrell had been accused of undermining the contest to replace Ms Sturgeon. Our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillies reports.
They were the husband and wife duo who dominated the highest ranks of Scottish politics for decades. The pair who led the SNP machine. The couple who will now depart sooner than Peter Murrell would have liked.
He's obviously taken responsibility for the recent issue with membership. He had intended to step down when there was a new leader, but I think he's right to make that announcement.
A far from shock announcement from an embattled SNP chief executive caught up in controversy. The party's communications boss resigned after being instructed by the SNP to deny this newspaper report, a headline published weeks ago revealing the huge drop in membership numbers. Journalism, the party's spin doctor was told to describe as drivel. Unbeknown to him, it was fact, the true picture concealed. Quitting with immediate effect, Peter Murrell said, "While there was no intent to mislead, I accept this has been the outcome."
The membership number should have been released, frankly, when the contest started. And that's why I think it's the right thing for Peter to have done, to have stood down, because as he said in his own words, it was becoming a distraction. I really want to get on to talking about, the policies, what it is I'm going to bring forward if I'm leader, next First Minister of Scotland.
Many within the SNP have been saying for years that it simply was not appropriate for the chief executive of the party to be married to the leader of the same party. And while this internal leadership debate has brought about divisions, the crucial part is it's been brought into the public arena. It's been bitter, it's been ugly, and many suggested the longer Peter Murrell remained in his position, the more damage he was doing to the SNP and its credibility. This sorry saga signals a reset for the SNP. It marks the end of the Murrell-Sturgeon era in a party left divided and no closer to independence as the leadership battle rages on. Conor Gillis, Sky News, Glasgow.
Right, it's just time for a look at the weather, and the sun's just come out here in southwest London. Well, the mild and unsettled theme continues, but Britain's going to be largely fine today before some more rain moves in. It's a mostly dry and chilly start with an early patchy frost in the northwest, but there are 1 or 2 showers around. There'll be good spells of sunshine through the morning, but increasing cloud over Ireland and Northern Ireland will bring rain to western parts. Elsewhere, it's going to be mainly dry, but the odd shower will affect northern Scotland and central England. Russian state media is reporting that President Vladimir Putin has visited the Ukrainian city of Mariupol in what's believed to be his first visit to Russian-occupied territories of the Donbass since the war began. Well, this footage is said to show the Russian president driving around the streets of the city. The port city was captured by the Russian forces in the early stages of the invasion. Now, according to state media, Putin can be seen here visiting a Philharmonic theatre, the same hall that was allegedly used by Russia to hold prisoners of war during sham trials that were held in the city. Now, a short while ago, I spoke to a former special advisor in Russian and Eurasian affairs, Mark Voyager, who told me that Putin's determined to show the rest of the world that he remains in control.
Ultimately, as you saw, he's visiting different locations there. He wants to show the Russian people that, he's taking care of things, that he's personally involved. This is part of this information warfare, which is really the centerpiece of Russian hybrid warfare, but also of Putin's personalistic grip on power. I mean, the stability of his regime is the center of gravity for Putin, and therefore he knows how to play this information game.
Well, Voyager there. Now, Donald Trump has used his social media site, Truth Social, to claim that he's going to be arrested on Tuesday. The former president is being investigated over a payment made to the adult film actor Stormy Daniels to cover up an alleged affair. Well, let's bring in the director of the Centre of US Politics at UCL, Dr. Thomas Gift. Dr. Gift, thank you very much for being with us this morning. So Trump posted this on his own social media site. It says there are leaks coming from the Manhattan DA's office. I mean, what do we think of what's going to happen next week?
Well, Kamali, it's important to emphasize that there's still a lot of information in this case that's yet to be disclosed. And I think the operative question is what the actual charge will be if Donald Trump's intel is correct, because that will dictate to a large extent how serious of a disturbance this is to Trump and what we're in for these next several weeks and next several months. And those possibilities really could run the spectrum from something like a relatively minor misdemeanor involving misrepresenting business records to something much more serious like a major contravention of campaign finance laws that would be prosecuted as a felony and technically could carry the possibility of prison time. But either way, if Trump is arrested and what he's saying is correct, then this does spell trouble for him legally. There's a saying that you can indict a ham sandwich in New York, so this case is unlikely to lose steam on its own.
Yeah, it's going to continue on. I've never heard that saying about the ham sandwich. Let's just go through the sort of the gamut of the legal challenges that he could be facing. You say that the indictment could run from the sort of misdemeanor to far more serious. And it's all based around this payment for hush money paid that Michael Cohen said, Trump's former advisor and fixer, paid to Stormy Daniels over that alleged affair and where that money came from, because Trump eventually reimbursed Michael Cohen for it.
Exactly. I mean, this is a case that's important to emphasize that's been going on for quite some time, several years. There's a lot of players involved, a lot of accusations that have been made. And it's just really important, I think, to emphasize that we don't know what those charges will be, because it could, as I said before, just involve something relatively minor like misrepresenting business documents. But if it actually was made in furtherance of a larger crime dealing with the campaign, that's where the severity becomes much more amped up. And that's where things like prison time start to get talked about. So it's just really unclear at the moment.
Would he still be arrested for the misrepresentation of documents? Would it still sort of involve, you know, there's been talk of him being put in handcuffs, being fingerprinted, having a mugshot taken. Would that still happen if it was the lower end?
Well, I think that the charge for Republicans is that it would if this is a political vendetta and selective prosecution. And so a lot of this debate, I think, really does surround what the charge is going to be. Because what we hear from defenders of Donald Trump is, yes, this is something relatively minor. Maybe it would be charged as a misdemeanor. But if it were anyone else besides Donald Trump, it would probably be treated in a way that is much more quiet. But because it's Trump, because he's so high profile, because there's an accusation that this district attorney is liberal and maybe pursuing some type of political vendetta, they're just trying to make a show about it. That we just don't know. And so we'll see how that shakes out.
And of course, we saw the message that he posted on Truth Social, where he talks about fighting and taking back our country, or words to that effect. I mean, what impact do you think that will have? Because it's very similar language to that was used before the insurrection on Capitol Hill back in January the 6th.
You're absolutely right, Kamali. This could definitely play, I think, into Trump's hands politically. And Trump already is using this case to rev up the base. And his comments on Truth Social calling for protest and to take the country back are really just a harbinger of more to come. It's all part of Trump's repertoire, that this is a witch hunt, it's a political vendetta, it's overzealous prosecution by a radical district attorney, it's a George Soros-funded hit job. This is the kind of language that we're in for and that we're already hearing. It's very similar, as you suggested, to what we heard in the lead up to January 6th. It's also kind of reminiscent of impeachment 1.0, impeachment 2.0, the search of Mar-a-Lago. And of course, we know that when it comes to Trump's most committed base, it doesn't take much to get them to go onto the offensive. So he's going to sort of use this for all that it's worth.
Okay, I do appreciate your analysis this morning. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, the cost of living crisis is taking its toll on many, including children, of course, who want to get involved in the arts. The sector has been hit by a huge funding cut in recent years, and a growing number of parents are now being forced to cut back. There are concerns that the arts could become a luxury only available to those who can afford it. Aisha Zahid reports.
This choir is gearing up for its showcase performance, but behind the scenes, some families are facing difficult decisions. The rising cost of living means some parents are making trade-offs, while others simply can't afford it.
She gets funding from the choir to be able to attend, and which is really good and it's really helpful. It means that she's still got something she can do. Without the funding, she won't be able to come.
I go on what they tell me they're enjoying doing. They know that there's a budget for things and they've got to pick between things. They can't do everything.
That's why the organisers here are focusing on being as inclusive as possible.
I think without making things really accessible and free, I do fear that we'll end up with music being a thing for the elite, which would be so sad, because I think there's something in, you know, who doesn't listen to music? I think everyone's got a favourite type of music.
New data suggests a quarter of parents don't have the means to support their children in the arts, while a third have cut back on their children's involvement in art-related activities. Over the last 2 decades, culture funding has been cut by 46% in real terms. Creative UK says there needs to be more investment into arts education to ensure no child misses out.
It's just terribly important that young people have access to culture, you know, that they have arts in their lives. It's one of the things that we are uniquely brilliant at, and it's something that enables us to compete globally in the international marketplace. And all of that starts with having a decent arts education in schools.
In response, a spokesperson said the government is investing heavily in the arts and has committed to providing $446 million per year to arts organisations through the Arts Council England, with almost 80% of these delivering activities specifically for children and young people. For now, it's hoped the situation doesn't get any worse. The last thing the organisers here want to see is more families being priced out. Aisha Zahid, Sky News.
All right, let's take a look at what the weather has got in store for us for the next couple of days. Well, it's going to be mild and unsettled, but it's going to be largely fine for most of us today before more rain moves in. A mostly dry and chilly start with an early patchy frost in the northwest, but there are a couple of showers around too. There'll be some good spells of sunshine through the morning, but increasing cloud over Ireland and Northern Ireland will bring rain to western parts. It's going to be dry with the odd shower. It will affect northern Scotland and central England. Hello and welcome back. Let's take another look at what's making news in some of the morning's newspapers. Here with me to look through them are the political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson, and the journalist and broadcaster, Badisha Mamata. Nigel, Badisha, good to have you back with us again. All right, let's crack on and go through some of the front pages. And Nigel, we'll start with you, your Sunday Mirror, and the front page there. Gary Lineker. Britain should be proud of Lineker. Take us through the reporting on this.
Yeah, I mean, Gary Lineker is still up there in the headlines. We're now days after the controversy. What this is an interview with a law student who was a human rights activist in Pakistan. And Gary Lineker took him in for 20 days. And he's got nothing but praise for Lineker. He also reveals that Gary Lineker is a fantastic cook, apparently, who makes mind-blowing meals, as he describes it. I think that the original tweet really did go too far, but then the BBC made such a huge mess of their response to it. What is actually good news is that Gary Lineker is back on TV, doing what he does best, which is commentating on sports, and now it's business as usual, and let's hope it stays that way.
Yeah, Badisha, quick thought from you, and you can comment if you like on Gary Lineker being an excellent cook.
He can cook for me anytime he likes. I'm a very happy professional eater. I completely agree with that analysis. I think that this has been a storm in a teacup, and it's also indicative of the way that traditional media outlets really have to get on board with the fact that their presenters, particularly much-loved veteran presenters, they know themselves extremely well, they have strong personalities, do have their own private social media accounts, and on those accounts, they may well say something about whatever's happening in the news headlines of the day. I don't think that what Lineker said was very extreme in one direction or another. So these things do happen, and the big media outlets need to get on board with that.
Okay, let's keep moving through some of the stories this morning. Badisha, we'll stick with you. Story we were just covering a short while ago, Donald Trump claiming he's going to be arrested come Tuesday. It's been covered in a number of the newspapers, and this is the coverage that we've got here in the Sunday Telegraph. Tell us about this.
Yes, this follows on from that excellent interview you just did with the analyst talking about Trump, who claims he's about to be arrested. There is no proof that he is indeed about to be arrested. One unconfirmed source says that there is, in fact, a rumor that Alvin Bragg, the district attorney, will be meeting with law enforcement on Tuesday. So something is happening on Tuesday. And of course, the DA's office, Hollywood movie style, is investigating the US twice impeached president over claims that he'd made payments to Stormy Daniels. But of course, people are commenting, particularly Republican partisan fans of Trump. They're saying, well, you know, frankly, presidents have always done this. This is a politicized attempt at trying to get this guy into prison. But it's really about the attack on the Capitol on the 6th of January in 2021. I don't think that analysis is wrong. I think the DA's office do indeed want to get Trump for something. And it is true that they're investigating him and they're working with the police and law enforcement. So something is happening.
Yeah, there are elements going on as well with his tax affairs too. I won't get you to dwell on that, Nigel. Let's keep moving on and go to another story that's making headlines this morning. And this is one that's been running all week, but some commentary about it in the Times that you've picked out, Nigel. And this is the situation in France. We've seen protests. They've died down a little bit the past couple of days, but after Emmanuel Macron forced through change to pension policy, people took to the streets, which is not unusual in France, but he might have some issues coming in the next few weeks.
Yeah, it looks like it. I mean, he's trying to raise the pension age from 62 to 64, and he wants to do this by pushing it through Parliament without a vote, because, of course, he doesn't have a majority there, which may end up with a no-confidence vote in him. It does seem a bit extraordinary the French are quite so upset about this. I mean, given that in the UK the pension age is going up to 68, the French have got it rather good on the basis of it only being 64. And of course, with one of the biggest problems facing us globally as aging populations, it's inevitable that the pension age is going to go up. People are fitter for longer, and therefore they can work longer.
Yeah, absolutely right. Badisha, a quick thought from you on there before we move on to the next story?
Yes, I think the controversy here is that this move to go forward without a parliamentary vote doesn't have the support of the people or indeed of Macron's political colleagues. So it's seen as part of his Jupiterian style of leadership. And his argument is, of course, exactly as we just said, about the rising life expectancy, but also the fact that paying out pensions is adding to France's very high national debt. And yet it's all happening at a time of protest. So next week and in the coming weeks, you're going to see strikes across train drivers, oil rig workers, other public and civil service workers, civil society workers. There's a sense that there's a great remoteness between the leadership and the travails of ordinary people. So this attempt to force through something without a vote is seen as being part of that Macron is out of touch.
Yeah, but let's stick with you then, because a couple more stories to get through. I want to get to this one in the Sun. 25,000 teachers attacked by kids. That's the headline there. But you should give us some of the detail. And let's remember that there have been teacher strikes this week. They are in talks with the government at the moment, but some of the concerns from teachers, not just about pay, it's the conditions they have to work in. And I guess this headline here is kind of indicative of what might be going on in some schools.
Yes, that's exactly it. So this article isn't really about student and pupil behaviour. It's about the level of compensation paid out to teachers, not just through aggression or poor discipline in the classroom, but also through health and safety, through having to work in buildings which have an asbestos problem, through injury, through accident. It all points to the same few things: decades of underinvestment, a system that isn't joined up, that isn't hanging together, poor confidence in the abilities of teachers, and a lack of support for teachers in doing what they were called to do by their vocation, which is to teach and enrich young people. And of course, it ties in with lots of worries and headlines at the moment about student behaviour, aggression, machismo in the classroom. What are we teaching young people? The influence of social media. That's part of it. But it's also really about the sense of loss of confidence, loss of a sense of support that teachers themselves have. I think that's the real scandal here, that this is one of the noblest professions, and yet it's not being adequately supported or respected, but apparently by anyone.
Now, Nigel, that will be a concern when it's not being respected clearly by anyone, as Badisha points out. We haven't got long, Nigel, so just a quick thought from you if you can.
Yeah, only that as Badisha says, it's really about compensation, this story, so it doesn't tell us what is going on in schools. But it sounds like if you've got 25,000 attacks on teachers, Ofsted needs to get involved and sort out what is happening in these particular schools.